My partner and I are not on the same page with our vision and how to grow the business. How do we better align on where we're headed? My partner and I have different roles within the business, but we still feel like we're not fully operating in our zones of genius. How can we better leverage our strengths? How do we keep the romantic and sexual spark alive?
What we do have
a lot of
data. Thousands of conversations with entrepreneur couples, and we collect a lot of the information to see the patterns. And what we're doing right now is we're answering these questions based on what has worked for Ariel and myself, and based on what has worked for our friends who run businesses as a couple at the 7-figure and 8-figure level. What we're going to do today is we are going to unpack some of the most commonly asked questions that we have personally received and some of the most commonly talked about topics that entrepreneur couples are dealing with. Yeah. So what we've done is we've compiled all of the questions that we've gotten after thousands of conversations with entrepreneur couples and after hundreds of coaching sessions with entrepreneur couples. We've taken all of the things that are commonly talked about and consolidated them into a top 10 list that we are going to go through and answer for you here today.
Yeah, and these are going to be pretty rapid fire, and it's also going to be pretty vulnerable and honest, because Kyle and I want to take some of the things that we've seen and really answer them in a way both from his perspective as well as my perspective as well.
All right, so there are 10 questions that we've kind of put together that kind of encapsulate some of the most commonly talked about conversation topics for entrepreneur couples. Ariel, let's go to question number 1, and I would love to hear your perspective on it first.
So, question number 1, it feels like my partner and I are not on the same page with our vision and how to grow the business. How do we better align on where we're headed?
I'm curious if anyone listening has ever thought that yourself. Have you ever felt like your partner and you are not aligned in the vision for your business, and you're curious as to how you guys can get more aligned? Yeah. Ariel, what's your perspective on that?
So the first thing I'll say is there was kind of 2 parts to it, right? There's the vision, and then there's the strategy, right? The how to grow the business. Right. And the first thing I'll say is you are not alone. A lot of people have been there. We have been there ourselves. Specifically, when you're coming into business, especially if you're in business together, but even if you have separate businesses, when you're coming into it together, you're really merging 2 completely different experiences and perspectives.
Yeah.
And the same in marriage, right?
Yeah.
But when you're doing that, I know at one point there was a time where I felt like, one way to grow the business was organic marketing, because that was my background. And Kyle's way to grow the business was like paid advertising, and that was more of his background. And there was kind of this clash around like what was actually going to be the lever to pull to grow the business to the level that we wanted. And so I think for us, what was the most helpful, and I'm going to have you expand on this a little bit more too, was not only getting clear on what the vision was, but then asking ourselves, how can we both bring our gifts to the table and execute the strategy in that way? So this all started with Kyle and I going on a vision date together. So the vision date is something that we teach a lot of our clients, and there's kind of a specific way to do it. But we walk through a vision date where they actually do an exercise. And in that exercise, it's where, they get clear on not only where are they going, like what's the big vision, and then what's the smaller goals, the little milestones along the way. What are you doing in the business? What am I doing in the business? What does our lifestyle look like? How much money are we making? And really starting there allowed us to then go, okay, this is where we're going. Now, how do we look at what are the gifts that you bring? What are the gifts that I bring? And how can we align those things together?
Yeah, I would agree with all that. Because even as I'm listening to you talking and I'm thinking about the hundreds of conversations we've had with couples that we had the opportunity to coach, really, when people say that they're not on the same page, it usually comes down to not being aligned in one of 4 areas. Either the vision, like where you want to go ultimately, the goals, which are the tangible steps to accomplishing the vision, the roles, which is like, what is your part to play? What is my part to play? And the next steps. Those 4 areas: vision, goals, roles, and next steps. If those are either unclear or not communicated between each other, that's a lot of times where people have a lack of alignment in their couplepreneur relationship. So that's why it's important for anybody listening to just consider, do we know between me and my partner what our unified vision is. Like, do we have a vision for our life that both of us can see ourselves fulfilling without one of us compromising in the process? Number two, do we have very clear and measurable goals to accomplish that vision? Number three, do we have clearly defined roles between us in order to contribute towards that vision? And then number four, how can we identify what the next steps are within our individual responsibility to make that vision a reality?
The action step then would be going on a vision date, discussing these things amidst you and your partner, and determining how can we create the lifestyle we want? What does that look like? And you may have different ideas, and that's okay. But there's also a direction that you're both headed together, both in the business and in your lifestyle and what you're creating for your family. So go on a vision date, talk about those things, come to a conclusion, and that's going to really direct the strategy on how you're going to get there.
Yeah. And inside of our free Successful Couples in Business Facebook group, we do have a training that is all about creating a unified vision that at least will get you started on that. So if you haven't had the chance to check that out, this will get you started on figuring out how to actually create and define a vision between you and your partner where both of you feel aligned, both of you feel excited, and neither of you feel like you're compromising what you truly want in the process. So I think that answers question number one.
Yeah, love it.
What other questions we got?
So question number two is, we find it very hard to turn off work mode and stop talking about the business. How do we not talk about work 24/7 so we can actually be present with each other?
Sounds familiar.
This is probably the biggest one.
No idea what you guys are saying. No idea what that feels like. No idea what you're talking about. Except for the fact that the very beginning of our relationship was all that. I mean, we're talking wake up, talk about business, eat lunch together, talk about business. And we have to figure out, how do we actually turn off work mode when it's time to be present with our significant other? What is your tip on this?
You just want to give our 3 ways?
We do have some 3 ways.
All right. So
I would like you to give them your favorite of the 3 ways.
My favorite?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what Ariel means by that is we teach 3 primary ways to transition from work mode into romance mode. And we'll go over them real quickly here, but I'm just curious, what's your favorite out of the 3?
These are battle tested. We have used these over the years. So I would say, honestly, I think my favorite is the nostalgic transitions.
Okay. What does that mean for the guy in the back?
So nostalgic transitions, what this means is before you are going to be with your partner. So if you're going from like, you're working, you're in the business, and now you're going to go on a date night, or you're going to be with your family, or it's a weekend and you guys are going to go out and do something fun together, right? Whatever it is. If you're going from work to personal life, take some time to revisit and visualize some of the best experiences that you've had together. And what this does is this actually primes your mind to get in, go from work mode and actually get into that very present mode, or get into that mental space of what it looks like when, maybe one of your favorite moments was when you got married. Or maybe one of your favorite moments that you guys had together was a vacation that you took together. Maybe it was, just last week when you saw your husband on the floor with your kids. Like whatever it was, if you have those moments that were some of your favorite moments together, you can actually revisit them and mentally visualize them before you're going to be with your partner or with your family.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think what's important, to add to this conversation is when Ariel was talking about nostalgic transitions.
Yes.
The reason why the word transition is in there is because the best way to go from work mode into romance mode is to install some time where you can do something to transition your mind from being in work mode into romance mode.
Yes.
So the transition is kind of like the bridge from you being in task mode and working all day in the Slacks, in the emails, in the DMs, posting on social media, talking to your clients, to transition from that mentality into a mentality of being present. We have to install a transition in between there. And one of the most powerful transitions, like Ariel was talking about, is something we call nostalgic transitions, which is where you put at least, 5 minutes up to 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour in between when you stop work and when you're going to be present with your significant other. And in that time in between, you mentally visualize and rehearse in your mind some of the greatest, happiest, most grateful, loving times that you have spent with your significant other. Yeah. Why? Because your subconscious mind, it cannot tell the difference between something you imagine very vividly and something that has actually happened in reality.
Yeah.
Now, what we like to do is feed your subconscious mind with reality to remind you that your partner does make you very happy. So that way, by the time you're spending with your partner, by the time you get out of the transition mode and you actually get to be present with your significant other, your mind is already primed, so to speak, remembering all the great times that have happened in the past, which allows you to be so much more grateful for the present moment that you share during the time together.
Yeah.
So that is, would you say, is your favorite?
Yeah, I would say that's my favorite. Last thing I'll say is it's also helpful if you have photos or videos of this.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that we've done, if you have an Apple iPhone, right? What your like photos in your phone will do is it'll actually create like a slideshow for you automatically. And so sometimes those slideshows are really nice to just go, because most of the pictures we take are like of, us and like experiences that we've had together. And so sometimes it's helpful to like, while I'm like getting ready for our date night, I'll put on one of those like slideshows, or I'll like kind of just flip through our photos and just look at some of the experiences that we had, like our wedding video or something like that.
Yeah. So anybody listening to this, just think about the next date night that you have coming up, or the next time that you're going to be present with your significant other.
Yeah.
Try this out. 30 minutes before that time, shut off all the tabs, both mentally and physically, or on your computer, and just start mentally rehearsing and reliving some of those happy times, and see if that doesn't make you even more present with your significant other. Now, that's just one of the 3 things that we teach. I'll go over the other ones really, really fast. The second thing that is really helpful to turn your mind off of work mode and be present with your significant other is to use the creative capacity of your entrepreneurial brain to ask your significant other questions. And your goal when you are with your partner is to ask them a question and find an answer that you did not know about in the past. What I mean by this is when Ariel and I go on date nights, if we still are thinking about the emails that need to be responded to, or the work that we're doing, or the marketing campaign that we're launching, or a problem we're trying to help a client walk through, and we're supposed to be present with each other at the dinner table, one of the fastest ways to snap ourselves out of those thought patterns is to start asking each other questions to find out an answer that we did not know about our partner to begin with. Now, here's what I can tell you. After being together with Ariel for over 11 years now, this works every time. And every single time I learn something new about her. So your goal, should you choose to accept it, is the next time that you're with your partner, go on a treasure hunt. And what we mean by that is when you are with your partner, you want to ask them questions to uncover the treasure. In this particular case, uncovering the treasure is a fact or something cool about your partner that you did not know about before. And while you're figuring that out, you're going to notice you're not thinking about work. You're asking your partner questions, hunting for treasure to find out something about your partner that you had no idea even existed. Like when I did this, I found out Ariel was a huge Britney Spears fan when she was a kid. I had no idea for over a decade of being together, but that's what we figured out.
How did you not know that?
I mean, I wasn't. I'm just saying.
What girl wasn't?
I mean, I know, but I didn't know that. I didn't know, I thought maybe you were just more of a punk rocker.
Well, I was.
Yeah.
But Britney Spears came earlier.
Didn't know that. Didn't know you did something with chocolate chip cookies. Like you take like the chips out of the cookies.
I eat the chocolate chips first and then I eat the rest of
it. Like didn't know that. Been with Ariel for over a decade. Didn't know that. So these are things that you can continuously find out. And they can be as simple and funny as those, or you could dive deep into what their hopes are, their dreams are, the bucket list items are. What is a dream that they've never told anybody? What is something that they're thinking about? These are all great questions you can ask to hunt for treasure. That's the second thing. The last thing I'll say in this, then we're going to go on to the next question, is what's really helpful for me, especially because I am always thinking about business, is a helpful dose of reality. And that reality is we are all dying. I should just leave it there and just leave.
All right, see you later.
We're all dying. What does that mean? That means you and your significant other, there's a limited time left on your life and your significant other's life. And the problem is with humanity is we don't know how much time is left for you or your partner. Yeah. Sounds morbid. That's because it is. But here's what's helpful about it. When you remember that you and your partner are here today, present with each other today, and you have today, and today is the only day that is guaranteed where you can actually spend time with each other, you start to treat your time together with a little bit more compassion. That's what I've noticed.
And reverence.
I don't know if any of you guys know of anybody who has lost a spouse, especially people who are very close together, but it is one of the biggest, just heartbreaking, heart-wrenching reminders that at some point, most likely you or your spouse, one of you is going to die before the other. And no matter which person goes first, we're all going to have this regret at the end of our lives. Yeah. I wish I would have spent more time with them. So if we already know that that's going to be the regret that we're all going to have, guess what? Might as well leverage the time that you have right now. Use this reminder. And practically speaking, I will listen to songs about death. I will listen to songs like 5 More Minutes by Scott McCreery.
Oof.
I'll listen to these songs that remind me like, oh my gosh, like time is passing. We can't slow it down. I cannot control tomorrow, but guess what? I can control my level of presence with my spouse today. All right. That's it. Those are our 3 tips. We have other ones, but let's just move on to another question for now. All right. We got to go more rapid fire.
All right. So question number,
stop preaching.
Question number 3. My partner and I have different roles within the business, but we still feel like we're not fully operating in our zones of genius. How can we better leverage our strengths? I think our answer is going to be the same on this one.
Very simple. Do not divide up roles and tasks by department, which means a lot of people will just dump all the tasks and try to divide them 50-50. Don't do that.
Or they'll just look at like just strengths and just weaknesses, which is a part of the equation, but not the whole thing.
Yeah. Instead, what we would suggest is to divide up roles and tasks by what we call energy styles.
Yes.
And what an energy style is basically just looking at the natural personality and propensity of your partner, seeing how they like to approach work, how fast they approach work, what type of pace they like to work at, what type of projects they like to focus on, and just where their energy lies throughout the day. If you know the answers to those questions, you can actually divvy up tasks by those things. And what we found in our relationship, just to give you an example, is that Ariel, knowing her energy style, is someone who is more introverted, loves to focus on one project for a very long time until complete, I should say. And she is a more methodical, thought through, organized person. We divide up tasks that fall under that energy style to her. So if you're listening to this and you are the person that is more organized, more diligent, more focused on one thing at a time until completion, and you could focus on one thing for a week or a month or even multiple months straight without diverting your focus, then maybe what would make sense is to give you the types of projects that take a longer period of time. Yeah.
So an example of something like that may be building a website, or, even if you have that outsourced, maybe it's, just a big longer term project that just an hour or 2 of working on it isn't going to complete it. It's going to take maybe a few weeks, a few months to actually go from point A to point B of that project. That's what I like to work on. Kyle, on the other hand, you can give your example. He likes to work on more of the quick tasks, the things that can be done in an hour or less, or, can be done that day. Because if he gets to the end of the day and that thing is not done, he loses his mind, if I may say so.
Well, if we're being subtle about it.
I would much rather work on something for a long period of time. He likes to rapid fire, get things done quickly.
Yeah, and you guys are kind of seeing the differences between Ariel and I's what we call energy style. Ariel is more of a methodical marathon runner. I am more of a quick sprinter. So we divide up tasks by those types of criteria. It is so much more efficient because here's what happens. If you just divide up by department, what happens when you and your significant other are both good at marketing, you're both good at sales, but neither of you are good at accounting, and all of that needs to happen to run a business.
And maybe at that time, you don't have the ability to outsource it yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even to that point, let's say you have a team and you're trying to decide, how do we manage our team? Well, think about between you and your partner, based on the team members that you have and the departments that you're overseeing, what type of tasks are your team members doing? And are you more involved with managing your team member, or is your partner more involved with managing your team member? Again, it all comes back down to energy styles. And for us, this is one of the answers to the questions that have unlocked so much productivity for us and have, I would say, prevented so many fights when I want to move 1,000,000 miles an hour and you want to take your time.
Yeah, because we have more understanding and respect for the way in which we both operate, which is different. But now we get to work in the business in a way that takes those things into account versus forcing us into a box that we don't want to be in.
That's right. And if you guys have any more questions about energy styles and figuring out your energy style or your partner's energy style, just reach out to us and we'll point you in the direction of some resources that can help you identify what your energy style is and what your partner's energy style is.
Yes.
Because man, the answer to that question, game changer.
Yes.
All right. What's the next question?
The next question is, my husband is more introverted and reserved. I'm more extroverted and outgoing. I'm sometimes afraid that I'm going to steamroll him in business and find myself shying away from doing things to avoid overpowering him. How can I better balance this dynamic?
I want you to answer this first because my mind took this in a different direction than I think they're even asking. But I'll still give my perspective.
So So we had this question, we've had this question multiple times, but I'm going to reference one example specifically. So when we had our Couplepreneurs live event a couple of years ago or a year ago, we had somebody stand up and, raise their hand, and she asked this question very specifically. And again, she was the more outgoing one. Her husband was a little bit more reserved. And I think what was so interesting about that is that was only her perspective. Mm-hmm. Now, what I mean by that is we knew both her and her husband, and everybody in the room got a chance to meet them, get to know them, actually see their expertise in terms of their business. Yeah. And at one point when she asked this question, we looked around the room and we said, okay, does anybody else in the room feel like the husband is like less capable? Like, she was kind of viewing it as like, I feel like he's less capable, or I am going to steamroll him because I just have all this, like, this firepower that just needs to go somewhere. Right. And so we looked around the room and we were like, okay, does anybody feel like that he was like less capable, that he wasn't as, able to handle his part of the business or anything like that? And everybody was like, no, like, not at all. But that's how she was viewing it, because she had this like absolute fear of, if she overpowered him, it was going to, make him not want to work within the business, not want to work with her, whatever it was. And what was so interesting is being able to talk to this couple. What it came down to ultimately was she was viewing their differences as something that was superior and inferior. Not that she thought he was inferior. She loved him and like respected him so much. But like, that was kind of the dichotomy happening in her mind of like, I am doing this, and is this going to be like better or different than this? And what was so interesting about it is it just kind of comes back to, if you guys are different, that's not a hindrance. And it's also not something to be afraid of. It's not something that you have to shy away from. If you are just different, it's just knowing how you're different, knowing how that shows up in the business, and then allowing yourselves to actually shine in those specific areas that you are gifted in, not feeling like you have to conform to a way that your partner is. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense as to like what is happening and why it's happening.
Okay.
But
so I'll let you fill in the gaps.
I guess what I'm thinking though is like, let's say somebody is in this position. What have we seen that has helped couples get through that? Obviously, part of it is what you said.
I was going to say, I think part of it is the mindset shift. Part of it is the mindset shift of our differences are actually a blessing.
Yes.
They are not a something that, what's the opposite of a blessing?
A curse.
A curse.
Yeah.
Thank you. A curse. Yeah, they're a blessing, not a curse. And I think that mindset shift is very helpful, because you could start to view your differences as something that'll actually make you go farther faster than something that maybe is going to slow you down. Or again, in her case, something that she needed to like back away from.
But knowing that individually is one thing.
Yeah.
Coming together in unity as a couple to make sure that both recognize it's a blessing and give permission to the other person. I think that's the second piece of this.
Okay. So what would you say?
I mean, I would just add that part B to it. Like everything you said is true. I would just add to that if anybody's listening to this and you have a fear of either overpowering your partner or your partner overpowering you, I think it's a great opportunity to have a conversation with your partner about this. Yeah. Because what we first want to do is we want to validate, is this actually true?
Yes.
Is this thought that I have based in reality, or is it just my own fear projecting onto the relationship? Which 9 times out of 10 is the latter. But that's why I would say the very first step would be come together, have a conversation, and just say, hey, Ariel, I have this fear that if I step up and I maximize my gift, I'm going to just overpower you. And I don't want that. Mm-hmm. And then you have the opportunity to either say, hey, that's true. Good point. Or you can tell me, no, that's not true at all. Yeah. And that alone, just verifying with your partner, could probably save 90% of the battle, because you might be fighting a battle in your own head that actually doesn't exist in reality. Yeah. I just wanted to bring that up.
I love that.
I would add another piece to that as well.
Go for it.
Not to go too deep, but let's just do it.
You're on a roll, baby.
Let's go. You ready for this?
Yes.
I think that especially in this particular case, it is a woman not wanting to overpower the man. So maybe this isn't how it was meant, but I do believe that when it comes to husbands and wives, males and females working together, there's also, I think, a traditional role kind of label put in play there that also says, like, I don't want to make him feel less masculine. Yeah. I don't want to like step up and lead, because if I step up and lead, then I'm going to make my husband not feel like the leader. Yeah. And I actually think maybe we disagree on this. I actually think that there's some legitimacy to that. I wouldn't say fear, but I would say just reverence. Now, here's what I mean by that.
I would say reverence.
Here's what I mean by that.
Okay.
Here's what I mean by that.
Don't hit the table. It's
what we have noticed is that when this isn't at least communicated or discussed between the partners, we work with a lot of amazing couples and extremely powerful women.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful when women step up, and we think it's a great idea. We don't think there's anything wrong with women like maximizing their roles and shining and the power that God gave them to shine.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, though, what happens, and it's not the woman's fault.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say this. It's not the woman's fault.
I agree with you.
What happens though is that when the woman starts shining, the man a lot of times will start to kind of cower away a little bit, and they will start to lose their sense of purpose and lose their sense of drive and lose their sense of control. Now, it's not the woman's fault that this happens.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go
What's
for it.
so interesting about this, and this is, of course, a question we're just answering generally from what we can tell.
Yeah.
But what I will say is the question specifically said that she was shying away to not overpower him. And you're also saying that the man is probably shying away in order to, because he doesn't have a clear sense of why is the man shying away?
Well, what I would say is, just from what I've observed, and I've also been through this myself years ago, when you as a man have a desire and almost like an innate goal to be a protector, a provider, etc., and you feel like your wife can just take over that themselves.
She can just do it herself.
She can just do it herself, which again, there's nothing wrong with.
Yeah.
But what it can happen if the man is not prepared is he's going to lose a sense of purpose, because now he doesn't have that belief of what do I add to the equation?
Yeah, he doesn't feel needed.
Yeah, and it could be societal or it could be nature. We're not here to debate that right now. But what I am here to say is that this is a pattern, and what can happen is that it can demasculinize. Emasculate.
There we go.
Make them feel less masculine and cause them to kind of shy away and actually become more like driftwood.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add this part of the equation, because if it's specifically women who feel like they don't want to step up because they don't want to overpower the man, and if it's tied to this in any way, then women listening, most likely it's not your fault. However, a conversation most likely needs to happen to, number one, verify, is this fear even legit? And to potentially talk about how can we both, in our respective lanes and using this respective gifts that we have, show up and shine in our own way. Yeah. Going back to Ariel's original point. The reason why that part is so important is because if the husband in the situation doesn't feel like he could show up and he has any control or any power at all, then he's going to lose his sense of purpose, lose his sense of drive, become kind of just like driftwood, just kind of going along with the flow, and doesn't necessarily know how to handle having a strong woman. Again, I'll say it 1,000 times, nothing wrong with a strong woman. You need that. Yeah. But how cool would it be if you had a strong man and a strong woman in a relationship that are both fully maximizing the strength and the gifts that God gave them to shine? Mm-hmm. That is the goal. Yeah. So I just want to throw that out there. All of this wrapped into one simple answer from my perspective. Yeah. Have a conversation about it.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
There we go.
All right. Love that. Okay. Love these questions. All right. Question number 5. How do we better separate work and family time? I feel like they both bleed over into each other constantly. Like when I'm working, I'm feeling guilty for not being with family. And when I'm with family, I feel guilty for not working. Such a good question. All right. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I want you to start.
All right.
I feel like I just rambled.
So I always go to the very practical, I guess. So maybe you can bring me back down after that. But my first thought here is just quite honestly, as simple as it sounds, creating a schedule that you're both aligned on. And the reason I say this, I think a schedule, as simple as it sounds, and as much as some people don't like it, I think it is one of the best things you can do for your relationship and also for your business. Because what tends to happen is when it comes to separating work life and family life and feeling like they're constantly bleeding over into each other, usually it's because there isn't a boundary between work time and family time. Now, also, that's where the nostalgic transitions come into play that we talked about earlier. But in terms of separating it, there has to be an actual boundary that you and your partner agree upon. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think having not only a schedule, but a schedule that you're both aligned on allows you to create a container for this is when we're working and this is when I am fully present in my work. And this is when I'm with family or my partner and when I'm fully present with them. Because if you just let them bleed over into each other and there isn't that boundary in place, then that's exactly what's going to happen. And it's going to create a life where you feel like what we often call like the gray zone, where you're kind of in this gray zone where like you don't really feel productive or efficient or effective in either of them, in work or in family, because you're kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Versus having a schedule allows you to not only be agreed upon that with your partner, but sometimes even with kids. Like we don't have kids personally, but most of our clients do. And a lot of the time they can get their kids to kind of like buy into it. Like, okay, this is when mom is working and then at this time, I'm going to be with you and we're going to do this and we're going to have a great time together. But it's being able to create a clear separation and a clear boundary, be aligned on it with your partner and your family, and then stick to it.
Yeah, we did a podcast episode with Monica Tanner. And if anyone hasn't listened to that episode, I would highly encourage you to do so. And in that episode, we did talk a lot about how to specifically enroll your family into the vision and to be excited about the business, as well as to set expectations for the household as to when work time starts and when work time stops. And honestly, I would just add that one piece. If anyone's listening and wants just a simple action item, a lot of times most people haven't clearly defined when does work start and when does work stop. If you can define those two things and just stick to it, you'll find that a lot of the mindset around being in work and being with your significant other will just evaporate, because you feel good when you complete your work, and you can feel good and not beat yourself up for being with your family and not working at the same time. Yeah. That's all I would say.
Yeah. So have the schedule in place and then a transition between the two. Use nostalgic transitions that we talked about earlier to help your mind fully transition from one to the other.
These are good.
Yeah.
All right. So we just went through 5 out of what we would consider the top 10 most commonly asked questions. Now, when we say this, we're not saying that objectively speaking, out of all the entrepreneur couples in the world, that these are the top 10 questions, because we don't have that kind of data. But what we do have is a lot of data. Thousands of conversations with entrepreneur couples, and we collect a lot of the information to see the patterns. And what we're doing right now is we're answering these questions based on what has worked for Ariel and myself, and based on what has worked for our friends who run businesses as a couple at the 7-figure and 8-figure level. Now, we consider this our top 10 because when it comes to our conversations that we've had, these 10 questions that we are answering right now are some of the most popular ones that we've had conversations around. So hopefully this is helpful for you as we continue. All right. So what's question number 6?
All right. Question number 6 is, I am more of a risk taker when it comes to the business and how we invest our money. My partner is more risk averse and feels like we can just figure it out ourselves. Sometimes I feel like that holds us back in business. What can we do?
You want me to answer? I'll start.
I'm going to give this to you. This is a good one. But.
Okay. First and foremost, in most great partnerships, if you're like me and you like to model success, which means you look at what successful people are doing and you model them, what you might discover, and maybe you already have, is that some of the most successful businesses that have ever been created have been created by partners, not just by solo entrepreneurs. So if you think of companies like Apple, I'm sure people listening to this have heard of Apple, right? Steve Jobs. Well, it wasn't just Steve Jobs who came up with it. He had a partner alongside him to help bring this to life. If you look at Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, billionaires. So they have to know something. They have to know something about business, right? What you notice in these billionaire or even multimillionaire partnerships, there's usually a go person and a no person. And that tension is good. In the words of Alex Hormozy, or Confucius, it's usually one of the two. It's you or Kyle Tresch.
Or Kyle Tresch.
I'll throw that one out there too. It is not a problem to be solved. It is a dichotomy to be managed. Because it is you both. If you are the go person, meaning you have the vision, you are excited, you're a risk taker, that's good. There's a lot of advantages of being a go person in entrepreneurship, when the very definition of entrepreneurship is taking more than the average risk for a financial gain. Entrepreneurship, especially in the beginning stages, my gosh, it absolutely involves a lot of risk. Maybe everyone knew that, right?
And a lot of go.
And just like pedal to the metal, just moving forward. So you need that. But what you also need is the counterbalance to that, which is someone who can look at the realistic situation that you find yourself in and who can say, no, yeah, no, yeah, no. Let me give you an example. Ariel and I switch back and forth on who's the go person and who's the no person, but we get to play each part based on the scenario and based on the situation we're talking about. So a lot of times Kyle over here, speaking about myself in third person, you got to be really egotistical to do that, by the way. Speaking of myself, I will come up and I will say, Ariel, pick a day of the week and I will have an idea to pivot our business in a new direction. I know that. And the reason why is because the way I'm wired is I see opportunities everywhere. I feel very strongly about capitalizing on certain opportunities that exist. And I'm like, all right, Ariel, we need to launch a mastermind. We need to do more events. We need to get on these virtual tours and these summits. We need to go guest speak at these things. I see these opportunities. But Ariel lovingly takes the opportunities that I bring to the table and is able to clearly analyze, hey, those all might be good ideas, but maybe they're not a good idea for right now. And so she'll kind of shut down in a very loving way all of these wonderful things that I want to do that actually aren't going to move the business forward. And I am so grateful for it. And that's not just like a platitude. I genuinely am grateful because our business would not be half as far as it is right now if we didn't have the staying power and the focus power of the no person in the dynamic.
Yeah.
So I would say that if you're struggling with that, recognize that it is a blessing. It is such a blessing. It is a good thing that you're gifted with that, because if you were both go people, oh my gosh, like your life would be very, very chaotic, where instead you have chaos mixed with stability that gets combined. Mm. So I know that that's a reframe of like the problem being not a problem, but is there anything that you would suggest to maybe address the problem?
No, I think the reframe is how you address it, because instead of viewing it as a curse, when you view it as a blessing, it begins to become something that you actually appreciate and celebrate, versus just something that feels like you said earlier, a problem to be solved, or it feels like something that is going to hold you back, because in fact, it's probably the very thing that propels you more forward. Yeah. But there are extremes. Yes. There are extremes sometimes when you're talking to a risk-averse person that actually doesn't know anything about entrepreneurship and thinks that anything outside of saving money and paying down debt is a risk. Yes. Yeah. If we're talking on that extreme, then we need to have a come to Jesus meeting where we talk about the reality of our financial future and how entrepreneurship is probably a better idea than trying to save a nest egg for the future. I mean, for the most part. Yeah. For the most part. Or on the opposite extreme, you have people that are so risky that they're just willing to bet the farm, bet the house, take a new mortgage out, do everything that's required to just capitalize on a new opportunity. That's probably the risk extreme. Yeah. So I think that in addition to the reframe, it's a good idea to try to balance a little bit where you see your partner's perspective, they see yours, and we come together. I have said that so many times with our relationship. Yes. Where I'm like, I am so happy we disagree. Yeah. I am so happy we disagree. Because if we didn't, we wouldn't reach a balanced conclusion. Yeah. If we just agreed on everything and we were just both like crazy go people or crazy no people, like we wouldn't get anywhere. Exactly. So again, not a problem to be solved, dichotomy to be managed, and work together to try to balance out the perspectives and meet in the middle somewhere, because probably the middle is the most accurate, most effective decision that you can make in your business. Mm. Okay. Love it. All right. Question number 7. How do we reduce our time in the business or create more work-life balance while still prioritizing revenue growth? The essence of this question is most of the people that we talk to, they love their family. They want to be with their family, but they also love business. What would you say? It depends on how the word work-life, like when they say like, how do we reduce our time, create more work-life balance? Like work-life balance is the tricky part. That's the thing that stuck out to me because it's just a complete myth. Yeah. Sorry to break it to anybody listening to this. It doesn't exist. It's like passive income is another one of those words that gets thrown out all the time. It's more of a marketing lingo term than it is something that actually exists in the real world. Now, why do I say that? The reason why I say that is because when you think of work-life balance, you picture a scale, at least I do, where work gets the equal amount of time over here and our family time gets an equal amount of time over there. Equal amount of time or equal amount of value. Right. We were talking to an amazing couple, the Rainmaker family. They have an amazing business. And they specifically said that like my family always has more weight than the business, like weight as in value. So like, how could I ever expect it to like do this? If you could see my hands, they're like, like a balanced scale. And that's never going to happen when one automatically has more weight. So weight or time. Yeah. So I love that perspective because that takes it from a weight value perspective. I'm thinking of it from a time separation. Think about it, everybody. Let's just think through this critically. We sleep how many hours a day?
probably like 7 to 8, right? On average. That's 1/3 of the 24 hours that every single person is given every day. So if you already sleep 1/3 of the entire time that a day passes, you already have 1/3 of your life dedicated to sleep. So in order to have a balanced life, you would need to have the other third dedicated to work and the other third dedicated to family. You can't go 8 hours in work, 8 hours with family, 8 hours of sleep. It just is not, that typically speaking is not how to divide up your life. It isn't very effective. What is more effective is to clearly define what work is, when it starts and when it stops. That is honestly the honest answer. Maybe not a lot of other people will tell you guys the honest answer because it's a lot more sexy to sell work-life balance where you could just like set up an automated course that like spits out money at you while you go like sip Mai Tais on the beach. Like maybe that's a more sexy marketing angle, but here's what I can tell you. Us, our friends who run 8-figure companies, even our friends who run 9-figure companies as a couple, anybody actually who has any sort of financial freedom where they can walk away from their work and go enjoy a vacation, like the real ones, the ones that actually do it, not the ones that are just selling stuff on YouTube. What do they actually do? What they actually do is they're very, very clear on what season of life that they're in, and they decide what the priorities are in that season. So sometimes you're going to be in a season of having to plant as many seeds as possible. If I was going to use a literal example, that means maybe you're in a season of hyper growth for your business that requires so much work. Maybe you're doing launches, maybe you're doing Facebook ads, maybe you're putting campaigns together. That's a season that is going to require your work to have more time in that season. But you're also going to have seasons where it completely reverses. Instead, you're going to have times where if you build the systems correctly, if you have teams correctly, you could be like one of our clients who honestly, like after doing so much work for so many years, they just put some systems in place and hired some team members, and they made more money in one single month while taking an entire week off.
And taking more time off than ever before.
So that is a reality. If that's what you mean by work-life balance, it is possible for everybody. But I just wanted to bust that myth of how most people assume work-life balance means, especially in the beginning stages of business. It does not mean equal time or equal value. Your family has more value, so you already can't balance it. And a lot of times work is going to require more time in the earlier seasons. But if you set up and you do the right work the right way, you will have more time with your family later. Did I even answer the question?
I think you did.
Or just bust the myth?
I think it's good. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's basically prioritize based on the season that you're in. Right. And the season that you're in is determining between you and your partner, where do you want to be at the end of this quarter? And then from there, determining what is required to get there, and then reverse engineering. And the last thing I'll say too is when we talked to the Rainmaker family on our podcast, one of the things that they shared that I thought was so good is the importance of counterbalance. And what we mean by counterbalance is if there's a hard season or like a season that you have to maybe double down in the business specifically because you want to grow, maybe you have a launch, there's something happening or a goal that you're reaching that requires a little bit more time, energy, or effort. There's also counterbalance where maybe we take a week because we're in the middle of a launch where we work a little extra. But then the next week, we're going to go on a vacation with our family. And you get to counterbalance it in that way. So that would be the other thing.
I think counterbalance is the most accurate way to describe this. Work-life balance, where work and life gets the equal amount of weight at all times, is just a myth. It's a fairy tale that doesn't exist in any universe. So now that we all know this, we can use reality and leverage reality to actually create what we truly want, which is freedom. The freedom to be able to choose when you work and when you don't, which you can do, but it's not going to always look like perfectly divided up time or perfectly divided up value. Cool.
Love it.
All right.
Right.
All right. I'm going to speed through the rest.
Okay. This one was pretty vague, but I think it's good that it's vague.
Okay. Am I knocking the table?
All right. How can we communicate better? I cannot tell you the number of times I have heard this. And I think there's so many ways that it can go. So we're going to succinctly talk about what this can look like. So how can we communicate better is the question.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, what is communication? We have to kind of define what that means to know if we're doing it better or not. Communication is basically you getting your thought into the mind of the other person validates that communication has happened. But a lot of times when people want to communicate better, what they're talking about is I'm trying to say something, but my partner doesn't understand, or they're hearing it in a way that offends them or upsets them. So my message is not sticking, it's not landing. So there are many different communication frameworks that we teach our clients, but for the sake of time, I'll just give you one. A very common example is giving your partner feedback.
Yes.
Because how many of you guys know that when it comes to business, there are going to be times where you have to give your partner feedback about things that maybe you don't like, or maybe some constructive criticism on things that you want to change or just discuss with your partner. And you want to do it in a way that allows your message to land, not on deaf ears, but actually land and be resonated with and be responded to well with. So if you want to give feedback to your partner, here's just a simple framework you could use. Number one, anytime you go to communicate with your partner, just acknowledge what is working first. Just simply point out, hey, what we're doing right now that's working is X, Y, and Z. You want to start there. Number two, you ask your partner, hey, would it be okay if I gave you some feedback? Because just so you guys know, a little communication strategy. Anytime you ask somebody if it's okay that you give them feedback and they say yes, they're much more open and receptive to whatever else you're about to say. Number three, you give feedback based on what you've observed. So if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to change the time of our digital date nights to a different time, right? I would say, hey, Ariel, what I've observed is that we do these digital date night trainings inside of our Facebook group right before we go on a date with each other, right before we go on our weekly date. I've observed that when we do this, it puts me in a position where I have to like quickly transition out of work mode into romance mode. And maybe I would want more time with that. What do you think about that? So that would be me coming to Ariel, asking for some feedback, or actually giving some feedback and just saying, hey, here's what I've observed. What do you think? And I'm inviting her to give her thoughts. And that is actually the fourth step here, which is to ask your partner what their thoughts are of that. So it's a collaborative solution that you guys come to. And then at the end, when we come up with a new answer, you just ask your partner what you personally can do to contribute towards the solution that you now have agreed on. That right there, if you guys follow those 5 steps, that's how you can give your partner feedback. We have many other formulas for communication. If you're interested in that sort of thing, just feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Just let us know like what type of area you're looking to communicate better on, and we can point you in the right direction. So I think that answers that question.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. 2 more.
Yeah. Question number 9. How do we keep the romantic and sexual spark alive?
Such an important question, because when you and your partner are not business partners, you are romantic partners and sexual partners. It's what makes you guys different than every other business partner on earth. It's what makes couplepreneurship so interesting, so cool, and so complicated at the same time, because your business partner is also the person that you sleep with. So in this particular case, a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about can apply here by setting up boundaries between work and romance. But to dive a little bit deeper, let's look at human psychology. How the human brain receives stimuli is your brain will receive a stimulus and you'll have an automatic response to it. That automatic response is trained all day long to see your partner in a specific light. So it sometimes can feel difficult to look at your partner as a business partner and then go on a date and look at them as a completely different person and have different conversations. It's hard to shut one off and turn on the other, not because there's anything wrong with you. It's just the way that our human brains are wired. We see a stimulus and our brains create different hormonal concoctions to respond to that stimulus. So without getting too nerdy, a really simple hack to feel more of that sexual chemistry on a regular basis and to actually feel romantically connected is to change the stimulus based on when you're working and when you're not working. So really simple things that you could do that Ariel and I discovered early on. And it was like, oh, wow, was that easy? I don't know. So if Ariel and I go on a date night, Ariel actually changes her outfit. She changes the way she does her hair. I do the same thing. I change my outfit. Essentially, we just take into account like what our preferences are for each other as a couple, what we deem and find attractive in each other. And we like to be attractive for each other. So we change our outfits. We change the way that we look, and we change the conversation topics. Like it's kind of hard to be sexually turned on to somebody when you're talking about KPIs, Facebook ads, client delivery issues, anything like that. Like we have to get rid of those conversations and bring them back to more personal, more flirtatious, more romantic type of topics. And that is how specifically you can start to immediately transition from work mode into romance mode. But even more importantly, like diving deeper into the sexual chemistry part. That's how you can start triggering the different hormonal responses of the mind that actually lead to quote unquote attraction.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. And there's so many things I could say on this topic. But the one other thing that I will say in piggybacking off of what you said is that When you are going from, being in work mode, so to speak, to wanting to be in a more romantic mode and to feel a certain way towards your partner, I think it's also important as entrepreneurs, we are constantly solving problems.
Yes.
And I would also argue that a lot of women tend to like multitask in their brains all day. I think men do too. But so there's a lot of problem solving, a lot of tabs that are open up here in our minds. And I think what's very helpful is also getting into the sensory. And when I say getting into the sensory, that means, certain smells that are nice, like, putting on cologne and perfume. I think that's maybe different than what you were wearing during work. I think it's also like listening to music.
Yeah.
I think it's things that bring you from operating in your head to operating more in your body.
Yeah.
And I think that's very helpful as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah. There's so many different things.
So many things.
There's so many answers to this. I mean, we can continue the conversation. I would say one last thing is just continue to talk to your partner and be open about what you both find attractive. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
A lot of times if sexual tension or energy builds up behind the scenes and it's not addressed, that can actually turn into resentment. And even worse, it could be projected and expressed in ways that are not legitimate or ways that are maybe threatening to your relationship. So make sure to have those conversations open and honestly about what you find attractive and what you do think is attractive. And the reason why we say this is because to keep the spark alive, what is the spark? The spark is just that feeling of like the dopamine rush you get with excitement to see your partner and to do life with them. That's what the spark is. So how do we maintain that spark? We continue to have conversations about what actually brings the spark out and do whatever ignites the spark on a more regular basis. Yeah. So I'll just leave that there for now.
Yeah.
All
and
right.
You don't want this going by the wayside to then build in resentment towards the business either.
Oh yeah.
So that's the other thing I'll say.
Yeah.
So
let's go to the last one. What's the last question?
The very last question is, I sometimes feel like my partner doesn't appreciate the role that I play in the business and in the household. How can I get them to understand how much is on my plate and respect me more?
Okay, you got to answer this one first.
All right. So
do you have
I think so. So this comes down to how can I get them to understand how much is on my plate and respect me more? So
okay, I got a simple answer if you want to.
Yeah, hit the simple answer.
Okay, simple answer. Have your partner do what you're doing. There you go. If you just want the simplest answer. The reason why I say this is like, you can tell me what you do all day long. Ariel can tell me that she takes care of our pets, that she cleans, that she cooks, that she handles so many things in our business, like the operations and design and things like that. And I hear that and I respect that. But when Ariel leaves, if she has to go somewhere else or stay at a different place or
when I got sick
or when you get sick and I then have to come in and take over all of that stuff to run the business, there's a whole new level of appreciation. So I'm just
and vice versa. I have experienced the very same thing with you.
So I mean, the things that I appreciate the most about you happen when I have to take it over. Now, practically speaking, I mean, this is kind of a little bit of a hack, but I mean, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, how do I get my partner to appreciate what I do? Maybe you can ask them to help in some ways and have them start doing it. And they realize how hard it is and how difficult it is. And then when you take it back and you start doing it, they appreciate it more.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think of that?
I like it.
Truthfully speaking, that is what got me to appreciate what you do the most.
The other thing that I will say, if you cannot get your partner to do it,
Sure.
which I think is a great answer, but if let's say you can't get your partner to do what you do, another thing that I think is important is one of the things that we teach a lot of our clients is something called like check-in meetings. Yeah. And the reason why check-in meetings are important, and I'll bring it back to this context, is check-in meetings are a quick 5 to 15-minute check-in that you do every day just to align on the schedule and the agenda for the day. Yeah. So it's like, okay, we said we were doing this. I'm doing these things. You're doing these things. What time do we need to come together for lunch? What time do we need to go to the gym together? Like you're aligning on what you're both doing individually and what you're both doing together. But how it relates to this is, I think what's very helpful is being able to see side by side, I am doing these things. Kyle is doing these things. And when I look at our, we have a check-in meeting document where we write out what we're doing for the day, I now get to see what Kyle is working on. And so I think what tends to happen is a lot of people are working all day and they kind of operate in separate silos where it feels like I'm doing my part, you're doing your part, but I don't really know what Kyle's doing all day because he's just go off doing what he does.
Yep.
But when I have it on our check-in meeting document and I can see these are all the things that Kyle is doing, and then typically we get to the end of the day and I know he accomplished all, if not the majority of those things, I now no longer feel like maybe I'm pulling more weight than he is because now I see everything that he's actually doing. And I think vice versa. So I think if you want your partner to understand what you're doing and respect and appreciate those things, it's not only if you can have them do those things, but also it's aligning every day on what you're both doing. So you both are seeing how you both contribute to the whole.
Yeah, I love that. That's very true. Yeah, because that awareness alone can just do it without even them having to do it.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, you have them do it and it'll work like a charm.
Yes.
Cool. So those are the top 10 questions that we have put together based on some of the most common and popular topics that we've had the opportunity to discuss with so many different entrepreneur couples. Everybody listening, thank you for asking the questions that lead to answers that lead to results for you and your business. Thank you so much for showing up and showing the world that you don't have to choose between having a successful business or a successful, thriving, hot, passionate relationship. You guys are all examples that you can have both. We will see you next time.
Bye, guys.